Sex trafficking is a subcategory of human trafficking. Creating an international definition is critical to enhance sound research and policy intervention that targets specific components of sex trafficking. The United Nations created the first agreed upon definition under the Palermo Protocol. According to the international definition, sex trafficking is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons who are under threat, force, coercion, fraud, deception, or abuse of power, are sexually exploited for the financial gain of another. One does not have to be physically transported between locations to be a victim of sex trafficking. Sex trafficking can be expanded to include exploitive activities similar to prostitution, sex tourism, pornography, and other sexual services aimed at financial gain. Determining incidence and prevalence rates are almost impossible due to the secretive, illegal nature of sex trafficking. All numbers provided are estimates, and accordingly, data varies from source to source.
In terms of global perspective, modern slavery, which includes sex trafficking, occurs in every major region in the world. The highest rates of sex trafficking occur in Asia and the Pacific. 4 of every 1,000 people in this region suffers from forced labor, in which sexual exploitation is a category. Looking at specific regions, the absolute number of those who suffer from forced labor is as follows: 16,550,000 in Asia and the Pacific, 3,420,000 in Africa, 3,250,000 in Europe and Central Asia, 1,280,000 in the Americas, and 350,000 in the Arab states. 19% of these totals is the population of those who are sexually exploited. At 19% in absolute numbers, it is estimated that 4,816,000 people suffer from sexual exploitation. Of that, 4,787,000 are female and 29,000 are male. Females make up 99% of the total population who are violated by sexual exploitation. Sexual exploitation and sex trafficking overwhelmingly and disproportionately affects women compared to men. 1,024,000 children suffer from sexual exploitation, which makes up 21% of the total population.
Sex trafficking is a growing global epidemic. There are an established 20.9 million human trafficking victims worldwide, and over 4.5 million are victims of sex trafficking. Approximately every 60 seconds, a person is trafficked for the purpose of sexual exploitation.
According to the Health and Human Rights Journal, social determinants of sex trafficking can be classified into 3 basic categories. Individual, which includes factors such as prior trauma or undesirable life circumstances that leave people with the belief that anything would be better than this. Familial and cultural social determinants, which include large dysfunctional families, undereducated populations, and poverty, or the cultural belief of what is wrong with prostitution if it can fill our stomachs. The last category is societal, which includes factors such as economic depression and rural areas. Specific factors that can put people at higher risk for sex trafficking include age, money, and living situation. Children and youth experiencing homelessness are a prime target of this lucrative and criminal industry. Homeless youth are considered by sex traffickers as relatively easy to lure from the streets with the promise of love, protection, food, and financial security. Young people facing homelessness often have to make the desperate choice between sleeping on the streets or going with a pimp who offers them food or shelter. Money and debt is also a determinant of sex trafficking. Studies have shown that some college students are taking on ever-increasing debt for their education and turn to alternative ways to ease the financial burden of higher education and fall into sex trafficking. While researching the college-age population and their vulnerabilities to sex trafficking, we found that 1 in 10 young people experiencing dating violence eventually experience sexual exploitation, approaching and including the severity of sex trafficking at the hands of their abusive partners.
Sex traffickers use the internet to enable easy and discreet financial transactions and recruitment. They often target people using social media, dating websites, and online ads. Sex trafficking is a growing and extensive problem in the U.S. There are an estimated 100,000 to 300,000 victims of sex trafficking, and between 2007 and 2014, only about 12,500 cases were reported. The estimated average profit for one victim of sex trafficking was $30,000 in 2007. According to one study, there are an estimated 100,000 to 300,000 victims of sex trafficking in the United States, but many sources assume numbers are much higher. Again, relevant data on any type of human trafficking is limited due to the difficulties in surveying and accomplishing research. Sex trafficking can result in injury and disease in virtually any organ system. Physical and mental health issues associated with human trafficking are extensive and often go untreated. Common health problems of sex trafficking victims are sexually transmitted infections, unwanted pregnancy, forced abortion, tuberculosis, HIV, physical injuries such as cuts, scrapes, bruises, and broken bones, depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. Public ignorance regarding human trafficking in general and sex trafficking needs can cause psychological angst and mental illness. Victims frequently report they feel stigmatized, labeled, and blamed. This type of discrimination leads to depression, anxiety, feelings of shame, and exacerbates negative self-image. Stigmatizing, blaming, and labeling victims can dramatically inhibit the recovery process. The secretive and illegal nature of sex trafficking also undermines research and data related to morbidity and mortality rates. Therefore, there is very little data published on the topics. Human trafficking involves violent and unhealthy circumstances for victims and offenders. Therefore, increased exposure to violent situations, unsanitary conditions, trauma, and deadly diseases like HIV facilitates a person's chance of contracting mental or physical disease and or dying.
All this being said, sex trafficking can happen to anyone, anywhere. Many believe that trafficking victims tend to be foreigners brought into the U.S. against their will or undocumented immigrants living in fear of exposure, while in fact, many are American-born. Lack of knowledge, awareness, and education puts people at a greater risk of becoming victims of sex trafficking. Refusing to acknowledge the problem, not knowing the signs of sex trafficking, and lack of awareness of how this can happen to anyone can lead to more and more people falling victim to sex trafficking. Many of the stories found from survivors of sex trafficking were similar. Most start with a desperate situation, a promise for a better circumstance, then manipulation that leads to illegal sexual exploitation. At 13, a woman named Wendy fled what she describes as an abusive home life in California for what seemed like the safety of a friendly couple she had met through a local motorcycle gang. The couple sheltered her in exchange for small domestic chores that soon became sexual. At 16, they branded her with a tattoo that read property of and sent her to dance at a strip club. Nobody at the club questioned the presence of an underage girl or the tattoo, which is where lack of education and awareness comes into play. Soon after, the couple started prostituting her to friends and fellow gang members. Wendy was so bonded to the couple that she didn't realize what they were doing was wrong. I was in search of a family, and they provided me with a sense of value, however messed up it was, she says. I saw them as the people who had saved me, when they were actually the people who were victimizing me the most. Although some people are kidnapped and forced into sex trafficking in much more brutal ways than showcased here, it's important to be aware that not all victims may know what they're falling into, as it can sometimes be a slow, manipulating process.
Intervention can start by recognizing the tactics of those who seek to traffic minors. Grooming, isolation, and control are common tactics used to exploit minors.
Survivors of sex trafficking require extensive and holistic rehabilitation efforts. Nurses can play an important role in addressing not only their mental and physical health needs, such as STI testing, treatment, drug and alcohol withdrawal, psychiatric treatment, and counseling, but also the collective aspects of livelihood, such as education, dietary needs, employment, and housing. Sex trafficking was once thought to be a threat to human rights addressed only by law enforcement and human rights agencies. However, studies have recently shown that healthcare providers, especially emergency medicine and nursing providers, are in an extraordinary position to identify these victims and intervene. Recent studies have found that approximately 87% of sex trafficking victims in the United States has sought care during their captivity, predominantly in emergency departments.
One retrospective study found that children who suffered from commercial sexual exploitation had seen a medical provider within the past 2 months compared to children who experienced acute sexual abuse exclusively. The implication of this study means there is a potential for screening tools to help providers identify children who are suffering from commercial sexual exploitation.
Identifying sex trafficking is a main nursing role in addressing this global health issue. Recognizing signs of patients such as no personal possessions, branding, and unexplained injuries can be the difference between bringing a victim to freedom. It can be difficult to differentiate between signs of domestic abuse and signs of sex trafficking, as many patients present similarly. This is where victims over the age of 18 can fall through the cracks, as nurses are not obligated to report abuse in adults, only children and the elderly.
Prevention, intervention, and treatment begins by changing public perception. We need to look at those who are trafficked as victims, not perpetrators. We should seek to remove victims from the chains of exploitation and not replace it with handcuffs. Safe harbor laws grant partial or whole immunity to minors who engage in commercial sex. The goal is to bring justice to those who perpetuate the system and free those who are trapped. To treat sex trafficking on a global scale will require all nations to extend social services, build a stronger evidence base with a focus on international research and data collection with a set standard of survey tools to measure metrics associated with forced labor and forced marriages and share these databases. International cooperation and partnership to align global, regional, and national efforts.